This is You're Probably Right. Entertainment first, everything else is just bonus. Opinions, all ours. Sometimes backed by research, but never the final word. There are always exceptions, so take it with a grain of salt and a slight dusting of chili powder. If something in this episode resonates with you or you want to reach out directly, you can email the show at yprpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find the podcast on Facebook. Just search You're Probably Right podcast and the page should come up. And if you are listening somewhere other than Spotify, you can find the show there as well. Just search You're Probably Right and follow the podcast so new episodes show up automatically. All right, let's get into it.
Hey, y'all, what's up? This is MCM, and you're listening to Your Probably Right podcast. We're gonna be here for a bit, and hopefully you're into it. This is episode 330. I like to make this episode, all episodes I try in general to make an experience more than just some information or some stuff. So let me recap what happened with my last episode. Last episode, I tried to say a dinner with the podcast, and I set out some stuff, and we're gonna eat. But you know what happened? It's kind of funny, but I guess when you have a good microphone, something like it didn't give me the desired. Maybe it's not supposed to give me a desired effect, but when I just listened to a little bit of it, just trying to figure out if it actually worked. But what I found out was because I have what is it? An SM7B, a Shure microphone. The black one that everybody pretty much uses on a podcast. The one that just looks like just a black plain cylinder and it says Shure at the back of it. Anyhow, yeah, and I use a pop filter, so which maybe that didn't help either. But I noticed some of the effects that I expected to happen in the background, like as far as the sound is concerned, because obviously it's only audio anyway, didn't come out because the microphone is that good at killing the outside sounds. I guess I could have orchestrated differently, but then, I finished eating about probably less than halfway through the episode. So anyways, whatever. Nothing tried, nothing done, right? Anyhow, this is, as I said, episode 330. Oh, speaking of last episode, I was saying that after the episode, I was on my way to do an MRI up here in Canada. In I won't say. Some people know. I won't say. I'll just say in the Toronto area. If you've been listening long enough, you pretty much know what area of Toronto I'm in. But what happened was the MRI was supposed to happen at 11:30 p.m. First they had said 12, but whatever. Anyways, it was crazy enough April Fool's Day. So that should tell you enough to let you know that I went to the hospital, filled out 2 registration papers. Don't know why I didn't get these because I was waiting all this time and because the MRI was actually scheduled by the emergency department about 2 months ago. And some of you might be saying, wow, you got an MRI in 2 months? No, I got an MRI for 6 months ahead. But what I did was I was in so much pain and just trying to advocate for myself. While I was off from work, I called every morning at 8:30, soon as the imaging department opened, to see if anybody canceled, because what happens. Sometimes people can't go to their MRI appointments, even though they're so hard to get. And I got one. And I thought, wow, I could probably keep bumping it up, but they let me bump it up so far ahead. Again, 2 months, which isn't that bad, but considering what pain I was in, I still kept calling, and then I kind of realized it was kind of futile to just keep calling because they weren't going to give me a better one. Anyhow, got there, filled out the 2 registrations, changed my clothes, put on the hospital stuff, just to find out that because I had an operation called a myringotomy. A lot of kids get it as infants or whatever, and usually what happens is the tube that they put in your ear, it usually falls out. Of course, why would mine fall out, right? So mine hasn't fallen out, and they had a question. Is it made out of metal? Is it made out of plastic? I don't know. I had this tube put in my ear over 12 years ago. So I had to be straight up with that. And the lady, I saw her, she was trying to Google it because the surgeon, he just put T tube. Didn't say T tube metal, T tube aluminum, T tube plastic. Either way, she doesn't know. I don't know how she's working in that area of the hospital and she doesn't know. But I mean, nobody knows everything about their job, right? Well, I guess eventually, like she'll probably know next time. But so here I am. Went there, saw the machine. I was approximately 20 feet away from it, and it didn't get in. I had to put my clothes back on. All this. She was sweating when she was telling me the information. I don't know if she thought I was going to be upset. I was upset, but at the same time, at least she took the time. She could have just said, "You know what? They're made out of plastic," and put me in. And next thing you know, I got metal ripping through my brain. You know what I mean? So, I, so I guess I wasn't upset at all, and I guess because some of the pain has subsided, I have been able to go back to my regular job and stuff like that. But I mean, it's still affecting me every day. So I hope I get this figured out. But anyway, that's just a story because I figured you need to know. Maybe you don't need to know. Anyway, today I think I got a good one for you. Um, Gonna try to go slow. As I said before, many times before, this podcast episode, like all my other podcast episodes, are for entertainment purposes only. Understand that this is not a Christian podcast, but it is a podcast by a Christian. And saying that, I'm not going to be preaching the Bible. I'm not going to be giving you any verses. Not today. I have before. But what my point is that even if I do, or I give you any type of Christian advice at all, please, please, please understand I am not a minister of the gospel. I am not a ordained minister. I do not hold a doctorate in anything. So I want you, please, if you are a Christian and you are trying to adhere to what the Bible says and the Word of God, then I would strongly suggest that you read the Bible for yourself and regularly attend a Bible believing church that does expository preaching. And the reason why expository preaching is important rather than the pie in the sky, the Lord said to me, um, is because expository preaching, the Bible explains itself. In other words, you would go with this part of the Bible, goes to that part of the Bible, and it connects and it helps you to understand it. It is not a mystery. Once you are a believer and hearing the word will rise your faith. Remember, it's not the works you do, it's the work that Christ did on the cross, because he was an unspotted lamb. He was a sinless person who became sin for the world. And somebody's like, what, for the world? Yes, for those who would believe. It says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. Right. Anyhow, I'm just going to get into this because I'll just go on a whole other topic. But again, remember, we're just chilling. So we could be driving. You could be doing some housework or whatever it is, or doing your other work, and or maybe you're just out for a walk. It's a beautiful day here where I am. The grass has started to grow. Flowers have started to come up. Almost makes me feel like I want to dig some up and transplant them around the place a little bit. But I think, again, I've said this the last 3 years. I think I'm just gonna let them do their thing. All right. So I sip my coffee. There's a kind of damage people don't talk about clearly enough. And it's not because it's rare. I actually think it's pretty prevalent in society. Because, what it is it's hard to explain without sounding bitter. And hopefully I don't sound bitter at all. dramatic or confused. And that's the part, I guess that's the problem. By the time someone has really gone through it, they usually they usually don't have neat language left. It's kind of like, when something just happens, like I think when you have the head knowledge, but you don't have the lived experience, sometimes you just go through stuff. And I'm sure I've done it on here where sometimes I'm not really sure and I have researched a topic and I've come back with what others say and what I understand from what they say and maybe others' experiences and stuff. But it's different when you've gone through it. So this entire episode is my experience, my understanding, and I'm sure it could be different. So as I say, take it with a grain of salt and a slight dusting of chili powder, right? I know it sounds so corny. I got to change that, but I just don't know what else to say. I'm just being real. Like, anyhow. So as I said, people just don't have the neat language when they've gone through these things, and I mean, maybe some people do, but the average person doesn't. It's almost like it's like, let me just tell you how it is. So, most people they've, got pieces. They got reactions, they got bad feelings, they got shame, they got some anger, some disbelief, and usually a lot of self-questioning. Like, am I too angry? Should I be angry? Should I be more angry? You know what I mean? So, I want to say this plainly. Some people don't come into your life to build anything with you. And it's sad, some of us, in these situations have been, and I will put myself in that number where I've been gullible. Sometimes, well, probably a lot of the time, it has to do with stuff that you've gone through or your upbringing. If you were shielded or if you were sheltered from a lot of different things, or you just weren't experienced to a lot of different things and types of people. You sometimes are astounded at the things that people will do to you. You know what I mean? We see it on the news, we see it in movies, we hear the stories, and sometimes it's like until you go through it, you really just don't know. People, they come in your life, and because there's something in you they can use. And sadly, again, you could be all in, and they could just be in it for whatever they can win. That doesn't always mean money. Sometimes it does. It doesn't always mean sex. Sometimes it does. It doesn't always mean emotional support, but of course, sometimes it absolutely does. But the larger point is this: some people are not relating to you as a whole person, and you have to understand that. I mean, people will come into your life who only like parts of you. I'm sure it's no bells are going off, or maybe they are, right? Some people like your looks. Some people like how much money you got in your pocket. Some people like your status or your job, your culture, your color. Sometimes people only like certain parts of your culture, your color, your body, your status. They're relating to you, they're relating to what in you can steady them, can feed them, can lift them up, can satisfy something for them, comfort them, finance them, admire them. Maybe it's the way you look at them, and maybe it gives them confidence. Or maybe it's the way you talk to them, it does the same. Or maybe you don't give them confidence. Maybe you break them down because maybe they feel broken and they don't feel like they need to be talked to decently, they want to be talked to a different way, sadly, right? Or maybe you just make them feel important. And again, maybe you make them feel unimportant. Sometimes you see that some so-called stars or celebrities with certain people, you're like, huh? That doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Sometimes some people just want to feel like regular people, and some people don't want to feel like regular people. So, beating a dead horse here. So let me move on. Anyway, if you don't know how to spot that kind of person early, I sure didn't, you can lose a lot trying to make sense of what was never mutual in the first place. And I'm not going to say that lightly. I'm saying it because one of the biggest mistakes good people, and again, good people, you know what I think about good people. If you've heard my podcast before, I don't think any of us are good. I know people get angry when I say that. I know we have nice people, helpful people, supposedly morally good people, but that's as far as I'll take it. But anyways, if you're the average person and you care about others, how about that? um, a lot of the time, these people end up with assumptions about other people. So, good people, as they say, make assuming, they assume everybody who comes close is coming close for the same reason that they would. First mistake, right? They think if this person is here, if they're opening up, if they keep returning, if they seem, sorry, if they seem affected, if they seem attached, then there must be something real under it. Maybe, but not necessarily. Because some people are not moved by goodness. And I say that almost still in a dumb way about myself, that I'm still shocked. You know what I mean? And it's sad, I guess. But yeah, it's sad that I think both things are sad. It's sad that I still feel shocked, but I think it's sad that people don't. Um, people don't move to come by or come close to you for good reasons. You know what I mean? Some people are moved by access. Some are moved by appetite. Some are moved by usefulness. Some are moved by the fact that they've found somebody who has something they need and not enough protection around it. Yeah. And that's what this talk's all about. Not ordinary heartbreak, not just disappointment, not simple selfishness. You know, I'm talking about a pattern. Again, surprise, right? A pattern where someone identifies what you're deprived of, um, offers enough of it to get your attention, right? Gives you enough of a sample to get your hope involved. Yep. And then starts living off the confusion that follows. Now, I'm going to say that again, and I really want you to just kind of hone in on what I'm saying here, because I don't think this is any conventional wisdom. I did try to check it to see. But let's see if I could just read it, and if you could just kind of soak it in. Sorry. I'm talking about a pattern. Okay, now just hear me again. Hear me out. And again, if you need to get the 2 times or the 1.25, whatever it is, speed on this thing to go quicker because that's how you process information. It's okay. I am a slow process type of a person, so I like to soak it in, and I don't want just a bunch of information because if I can't tie it to anything and I don't have time to tie it to different situations or look at different relationships, then a lot of the information, let's just say you're doing the talk or whoever's doing the talk, I might not grasp everything. So I'm just going to try to be as plain and as simple as possible in this. A pattern where someone identifies what you are deprived of. In other words, what you need, maybe what you lust after, what wasn't given to you in a past relationship. They find out what that is. And not to say that they're being evil necessarily, because some people, like I personally, if I know that someone was deprived of respect, I'm going to try to give them respect at bare minimum to let them know that, you know what, you are worthy of respect. You understand? So I'm not saying that every single person who does this is going to manipulate you, because some people honestly want to, you know, some people want to save people, some people want to heal people, some people want to help people, some people want other people to know that not everybody's the same. And generally, those are people who come from a good place in their heart when they're like that, when they're not out to manipulate you, right? And then some people try to offer what they think you want or what they think you probably need. And some of those people are doing it again, just out of the kindness of their heart, out of ignorance. But then some people are trying to, for lack of a better term, I say, run game. So they identify with what identify what you're deprived of, and then they offer you enough of it to get your attention. It's like, wow, somebody actually knows what I want. Shocking, right? They give you enough of a sample to get you involved, and then they start living off of the confusion that is created or that follows. And that's the pattern. And if you've ever lived there or lived through that, you know exactly why it's hard to explain to people who haven't. And that's why I'm taking it so slow. Because from the outside, it can look like mixed signals. From the inside, it feels like being slowly taught to betray your own judgment. I'm going to break it down. Not to keep anybody stuck in the past, not to glorify pain and identify, or definitely not to ruminate, because I don't want to. I know it happens sometimes in this podcast. Sometimes I think I got there and try to make sure that people get there too at the same time or whatever it is, but that's just my problem. Anyhow, I want to make it plain enough that once you see it, you know, we can stop calling it by, prettier names. So, the scout. The first thing people get wrong is they think use starts with asking. It's kind of like, I don't know if you ever watched that show, Everybody Hates Chris, that Chris Rock did, where he goes, there's this guy, he's like, young man or little man from across the street, let me hold $1. you know, um, or, they're just begging you all the time in general, right? It usually doesn't. That's the funny thing, right? That's the weird thing. That's what you wouldn't expect. But yeah, a lot of time it starts with study. The user doesn't always come in obvious. They're not always aggressive. They're not always arrogant. They're not always demanding. In fact, a lot of them understand that direct talking too early ruins the setup. So they don't begin with taking. They begin with reading. They read your nature. Maybe they know your culture. Maybe they know your religion, right? Now, you can probably tell that I've thought about this a lot. So, like right off the bat, could you imagine somebody? I think we do this naturally to a certain level. And then I believe there's some people who really, really take in the information. So, and maybe I'm going too slow because this is like exciting for me. So let me go a little bit faster. But they read your nature, whatever that makeup is, right? They read your softness. They read your loneliness. They read your hunger. Maybe they read your status in society, right? They read your self control. They read how badly you want to be understood. They read whether you're the type to keep giving someone the benefit of the doubt long enough or long after the doubt should have won. And sometimes they're not even that good at reading people on their own. Check that out. Hang on one second. I got to take this sweater off. Whew, it's hot. All right. So hopefully you kind of understand what I'm getting at. Again, this is something out of my this is like an apparition out of my mind, and it's down on paper per se. Um you kind of like okay. I guess this episode is a little bit sinister, I suppose. But again, when you've been through this, you kind of realize that this was not an innocent mishap that happened to you in a relationship. Like when you're back and I guess you are literally ruminating over what happened, and you start putting the pieces and putting 1 to 3 or 1 to 2, 1 to 3 to 4, and so on. And you realize that there's a lot of connecting dots and points and progressions. You realize that there was some sort of plan by someone. So that's more or less what I'm talking. I'm not talking about the person that kind of fumbles into the situation like that and just kind of it happens or stumbles into it. It's more of it you see the calculations when you look back at the situation. And as I said, sometimes the person's not even really good at reading people on their own. And that's another thing people miss. Some users don't actually have great judgment. They may be poor judges of character in general. They may let all kinds of foolishness around themselves, around their lives, around their homes, around their children, their family, their job. They may compete with friends, compete with their siblings, compete with people around them that they don't even fully respect. Their discernment can be very weak. And you see, that's the part for me that I pity the person, because I think a lot of people, if they had better discernment and if they were um, a better judge of character in general, the people that they let in their lives or around their lives or their family or whatever it is, um, I think they might be more discerning, you know, about like what they're doing, about what things that they're causing in other people's lives. It's almost like they're just floating around. Some, not all. But even with weak discernment, they can still develop um a feel for usefulness. And if they can't identify it clearly on their own, they borrow judgment. That's simple. They use other people's skills, right? They bounce things off friends, right? They bounce things off siblings. They bounce things off of maybe other longtime connects or maybe old relationships or people who are possibly wanting some from them and who are hovering around. They don't tell any one person too much, right? But they spread enough around to get a good read. Not because they're always brilliant, as I was saying. Sometimes because appetite will do the work judgment never learned how to do. So, you figure it out. You find ways to navigate. And what are they looking for? They're looking for someone or somebody who is safe enough to approach, soft enough to move, strong enough to lean on, useful enough to benefit from, and often isolated enough that if something goes bad later, there won't be a strong circle around that person to, you know, really get a reality check as to what is happening. And that matters because the best mark is not just a good person. The best mark is a good person with a low outside protection. And you might hear me say that in this I'm talking about users and marks, or the user and the used, but I'm just calling the I like the word mark. Anyways, um so as I said before, that person, that a good mark is a person who has low outside protection. There's not very many people in their corner, right? If it's a boxing match or MMA fight, they don't have the person saying, "Hey, when you throw your right hand, make sure you duck this way because he's catching you on that side." You don't have anybody like that, so you're getting caught every time with the other punch that you're just not seeing coming. They don't have anybody looking at it from a different vantage point, in other words. But the user generally does. If they don't have that discernment, they usually find a way to get more intel another way. Now, they don't have, the mark doesn't have very many trusted outlets, not many wise voices, except for maybe the ones that were, early in their life, possibly, and that's if they remember. Not many people they can take the whole situation to, right? It would usually be awkward for them to do so and to get a clean read from. And that's part of the setup. And when people don't understand that, they keep asking the wrong questions. They ask, why me? Sometimes the answer is not mystical. Sometimes the answer is because you had something worth using and not enough protection around it. And that's the scout. They study first, and a lot of damage starts right there before the mark even realizes they're being studied at all. Next, the story as an entrance. A user doesn't always come with a handout. Sometimes they come with a story. And one of the most common stories is pain. They talk about what they've been through. They talk about exes, bad relationships. They talk about betrayal. They talk about being misunderstood. They talk about how they gave and got nothing back. They talk about being done wrong. And some of that might be true. It probably is true. And that's what makes this hard. The presence of truth does not cancel the presence of manipulation. In some cases, it actually helps it because it's like, wow, this person trusts me with all this story and all this information. If I said this to someone else, like, you just think, oh, they're letting you in. You know what I mean? Because they are, right? Because A person can tell you something real and still use it in a false way, right? You don't know the level that they've been affected. You don't even know what they had to do with what happened to them. You know what I mean? And that's important to understand. The issue isn't did they suffer? The issue is how is the suffering being used in the interaction? Because some people use pain as an entrance. They use it to create sympathy fast. They to create intimacy fast, to create exception fast, to make you feel like you're seeing the real them before they actually, show you their character. So you think it's almost like you feel like you're being let behind like a curtain, you know what I mean? Like a backstage pass to their life. And anybody who's ever been given a backstage pass or some sort of privilege at a place where there are a lot of people who would desire to get that privilege generally believe that once they get behind that curtain, they get to see the wizard. They get to see the artist in their personal environment behind what everybody else sees. For some reason, you feel like you're in a safe, real place, right? And for those who have been let into those areas and have been maybe taken advantage of, they know exactly what I'm talking about. And that's just from when we're really thinking about backstage passes and all that stuff, you kind of get it, right? All of a sudden, you're over at Michael Jackson's house or something. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're just like, huh, how'd I get here? So think about that as far as in somebody's life where they're giving you information where you think, oh, this must be embarrassing. And they're telling me this. Oh, they must trust me. Right. And after a while, if you're paying attention, you start noticing what's missing, though. You hear about who hurt them. You hear about who failed them. You hear about what was done to them. But you rarely hear a clean account of their own wrong. I talked to somebody a few years back, and they were giving me an explanation of all the stuff that happened to them. This person is this way, and this person is that way. And I'm not gonna say it's a sixth sense, and I'm not gonna say it's the Holy Spirit. But and it could be, but it's just like I get this kind of this check in my inner that somehow I feel sorry for this person. Like they'll say this person did this and this person did that, but like there's information that's missing. You know what I mean? Like they'll give me one, they'll tell me this happened, and then they'll go to four, that happened, and then nine, I did this, and it's like, okay, what are all these there's little pieces that are missing. There's something that you probably did that you're just not coming up plain with. As I said, you hear who hurt them, who failed them, that you hear what they gave and what they did for them or for others, right? But you rarely hear a clean account, not a mumbled, not a by the way, I gotta go. I did this and it wasn't great, but I gotta go now. Talk to you later. You know what I mean? Like like really where you sit in it and you hear them confess what they did. Not that they owe you a confession, but if somebody can't be straight up and honest about the crooked nonsense or wicked sinful thing that they might have done in the midst of a situation, even if let's just say their wrong wasn't as bad as the other person's wrong, or maybe it was and they just kind of omit that information, you know what I mean? You rarely hear it. You rarely hear I lied straight up. I used people. I handled that badly. I broke trust. I was selfish. I did damage. And I don't mean performative self-blame. That's too cheap. That's way too cheap too. I mean real ownership, because ownership costs image. And here's a funny thing, I didn't vow to myself to be this way, and I don't know that I wasn't this way in the first place. It's kind of funny how you live your life. Like, for instance, for me personally, I when my parents, my older siblings, some passed away. And it's like I felt like, first was my father, and then it was my older brother, and then it was my older sister, and then it was my mother. You know, and I've talked about these situations before at length. Um, when my father died first, it was kind of like it wasn't that all bets were off. It was kind of like I don't have anybody to fear. He's gone. You know what I mean? And not that he used to hit me. My dad hit me once in my whole life. And when I say one hit, I mean one slap. And I was a little boy. So it wasn't that way. It was I was fair. Scared to embarrass him. I was scared to hear words that, like, I disappointed, or disrespected, or all that stuff. I just had respect for my parents, you know what I mean? So when he was gone, I think that's when I either got a tattoo or I got ear piercing or something that I knew that I might have had it before he passed, but not when he was like totally cognitive, you know what I mean? And it was just, I guess it was just because I had that respect for my dad, you know what I mean? But I don't even know why I'm veering off on it, but it's just, yeah, it's just it's just like there's certain things about me that there's certain things that I just didn't want to do, because I always wanted to have respect. I always maybe sought that love that maybe I didn't get fully that I thought I should have got, or whatever the case is. And I think I've gone into that a little bit as well. But yeah, so yeah, just thinking about it. Anyhow, yeah. But image, you know, when somebody is willing to taint their image moving in or coming into a relationship, or maybe something's not even a relationship yet, when somebody's willing to be like, you don't want them to come in so self-deprecating that they're like making themselves like it's almost like a sickness, and you really feel sad for the person. But you want a person who can come in honestly and say, I did this, it was wrong, I realized it was wrong, and hopefully I'm not that person anymore. But for the grace of God, there go I. Because you've seen other people who've really, really messed up their life because they've maybe done the same thing. And somehow, maybe the mercy of God, you didn't end up being a total wreck. You know what I mean? And so why I was getting into that in the first place, because now I remember, um, was that I wanted to say, I like, from broken up, messed up relationships, whatever it is, I wanted to be able to go in and say, okay, well, in my mind, I'm interested in this person. Um, I know that I have a checkered past, a filthy past, or a dirty past, or a bad past, or sinful past. I've done sinful things, and I want to be able to straight up said, you know what? Yeah, I'm single. I did this over here. It's really a grimy thing. And, or I did this and it was really bad. And, there's no excuse for it. Because generally we want to, if we've already seen value in someone, you really you don't want to just say, come on over here for a second. Let me open this door. Boom. Check out all the skeletons in my closet. You know what I mean? But at the same time, if you're getting close to someone or whatever it is, you would expect to see them at least reach into the closet and pull a skeleton out every now and then. You know what I mean? They're not just reaching into other people's closets and pulling all their stuff out and making them sound like they're a victim. You know what I mean? So I would honestly tell you, if you're dealing with somebody and all you're ever hearing about is how bad their ex is, if you become an ex, what do you think they're going to do about you? Nobody's all bad. You know what I mean? There had to be some redeeming qualities why you were with the person in the first place. And if you never, ever, 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 ever tell me something positive about that jerk that cheated on you, then there's either you were in a bad spot and you couldn't recognize anything, or there's a chance you're lying. I mean, that's just straight up. So sit with that for a second. As I said, some people will give you 100 stories before they'll give you one real confession. And I personally, I just promised myself I just was not going to do that anymore. You know, not that I ever would go that far. I just couldn't. You know what I mean? I would have to, like, it's like the guilt would be all over me. It's like, I know you got to say what you did. You know what I mean? So while you think they're opening up, right? There's a second thing happening. They're not just sharing, they're measuring. How much pity do you have? How much patience do you have? How much understanding do you have? How ready are you to become a safe place for somebody who hasn't actually earned that level of access yet? That's how some people almost get, I would say, almost get the person to agree to be used before the use becomes obvious. They don't say, I'm going to use you, by the way. They arrange their air around you until you offer. They create the emotional condition where helping them, understanding them, caring for them, waiting for them, or making allowances for them starts to feel natural. And by the time the mark really realizes how much they've normalized, a lot has already been handed over voluntarily. And that's why this kind of dynamic is so hard to untangle later. It doesn't feel like robbery. Sometimes it does. But generally, it just feels like a gradual surrender. But, you know, I would say while you're in it, sort of, but I think after sometimes you do feel, you're like, you really got to wonder. The necessary carrot. Once they've studied enough, the next move usually isn't random. They dangle the thing that will work on you, not just something attractive, the thing. Yeah. The thing you've been deprived of, the thing you need, the thing you ache for, the thing you've tried to act like you don't care about, but you do. The thing that, if it showed up in the right form, would make your judgment start negotiating with your longing. And boy, oh boy, once you get there, but that is the necessary carrot. For some people, it's tenderness you're lacking. For some people, it's admiration that you never got. For some, it's consistency. For some, it's sex. For some, it's emotional closeness. For some, it's respect and value. For some, it's experience of being deeply chosen by somebody they wanted badly enough. And once that thing shows up, especially if it feels tailored, the mark is no longer just dealing with another person. They're dealing with possibility. Possibility changes people because now it's not just who is this? Now it's, is this the feeling or is this the thing I've been waiting for. And that's where a lot of strong people get weak. Not because they're dumb or stupid or whatever, because deprivation has memory. If you've gone too long without something important, you become more vulnerable to the first convincing version of that thing that appears, right? Like, sorry, I probably didn't say it right. If you've gone too long without something important, you become more vulnerable to the first convincing version of that appears. It doesn't make you foolish. It makes you human. But it does make you easier to stare if you don't know that thing about yourself, right? And if you're not like connected or in tune at that time. And here's another truth, another hard truth. The user usually doesn't want all of you. Not really. And let me just stop here for a sec and interject a little bit more. It's like generally the mark, and I guess I think I'm gonna have to put on on this cover, users and marks. Maybe that's what I should call this. Um, if you've ever been a mark, you'll realize that this person likes this about you, but they don't like a lot of other things about you. Or they like these things, and then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that they don't like, they don't mess with, or when you bring it up, maybe it's your interest or something, they kind of like, "Ah, whatever. Bleh, let's go over there with that stuff. I'm over here for this over here." Right? Hopefully you feel what I'm saying. So, as I said, they usually don't want all of you. And that should tell you something. That should be a big, 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 big check for most of you listening. If somebody doesn't want all of you, then why do you want to give them any of you in the first place? So, they may want aspects of you, your body, your loyalty, your steadiness, your attention, your social value, your goodness, your image, your labor, your money, your warmth, maybe your care, maybe you're focused, your attention. That attention is huge for a lot of people. Sometimes they're not moving toward you because they love your whole humanity. They're moving towards the parts of you that give them lift or maybe give them a gift. So yes, they may be drawn to you. You might feel it. You might be like, no, but I recognize that they really like we had this connection. Yeah, you did. They just didn't try to connect to all of you, right? Think about a picture where you're connecting the dots and there's dots that are just not being connected. So the picture's not the picture that you're creating is ambiguous. It's what's the art called? Not impressionism. Abstract. Because all the dots are not being connected for you, it's not showing you a clear picture. It's gonna be up to interpretation. But this selective draw is not the same as care. Appetite is not the same as reverence. And that's why people stay confused for so long. Because the user may not be faking every single thing. There may be real attraction, real interest, real pull, but it's narrow. It's self-serving. Yeah. It doesn't mature into reciprocity. And if you didn't get anything else, I think what I said in the last 5 minutes should probably tell you a lot. And if you're worried about this for yourself, I would honestly say just pull this thing back and maybe listen to that again. Um, but what I'll tell you is it matures into leverage. And that's the necessary carrot, not love, the right bait. All right. The sample and then the drip. Hold on, let me pull this down. This episode is going longer, and you know what? I am honestly fine with that. Sometimes not too often, as most of you know, I try to adhere to a certain time frame for my episodes, and then there's been a few that I've dragged on longer than other ones in past. Again, this is long form, and if I'm just giving you the same um content, the same experience that everybody else is giving you, then there's no point for me really in this space, you know? That's how I feel about it anyway. Okay, here we go. And remember, you can always come back if I've been too long-winded. Okay. The sample, then the drip. This is where the hook really sets. They don't always start with breadcrumbs because that won't work on a lot of people. A lot of the time, they start with a sample. So if you want to think of yourself as a fish, hook, line, sinker, they might throw you. I'm not even going to say it because it might gross some people out anyway. But there's going to be some bait that you're going to get. You're going to be able to devour it, right? You're a customer at Costco and they're cutting those, what are those donuts called? What are they called? What are those donuts called? Krispy Kreme donuts. They cut them into quarters. Give you a good taste. Maybe you can get a box now. No. You get it. You get it. Anyways, a lot of time they start with a sample and not a tiny one either. It's at least a quarter, right? At least a quarter of that donut. Enough attention that you didn't imagine it. Yeah, it tastes good. Enough warmth that you felt something real. Enough closeness that something happened. Enough chemistry, tenderness, pursuit, or intensity that later, when the pattern changes, you can't honestly dismiss the beginning as a fantasy. Something happened there. And that's the point. The mark is not supposed to be chasing something they invented. They're supposed to be chasing something they already tasted. That's the huge difference. Because once somebody has had a real sample of what they wanted, hope becomes much harder to discipline. Trying to get that high, right? They're trying to get back to where you were, get more of that thing. Now they're not asking, is this possible? Now they're saying, I know it's possible. I've already seen it. I've already been there, done that. And then the shift comes. You know what? I'm going to make this into well, you probably already know. Anyhow, the sample becomes a drip now. Now, hopefully you know what a drip is. Not a glass, a drip. Think about, if you've ever had an IV and they got that thing and it just looks like water dripping, like a literal drip. For those of you who are nurses or in the healthcare field, or those of you who've been in the hospital or seen anybody or watched a movie of a hospital, right? Give me something, cc's of this, yada, yada, yada. Needle goes in and then there's a drip going and all that. Yeah. Anyway, not a meal though. Breadcrumbs. There we go. A little attention here, a little warmth there, a burst of closeness here, then distance. It's like a dance. A good conversation, then silence. One strong moment, then a long stretch of uncertainty. And people who haven't lived through this underestimate what that does to your mind. Because the problem isn't just deprivation anymore. Now it's deprivation mixed with memory. Think about it. Something you haven't had a lot of, something you had, and now it's a memory. It's vivid. It's there. It's in front of you in your mind. Wait, you experienced it. Maybe you got a picture, or maybe you got a text, or you remember the conversation, or whatever it is. But now they're back to they're back to depriving you again. And you got the memory, right? It's like you hit the lotto. You hit a lick, as some people say. You came up. And then they said, we're going to just give you a couple dollars every month for the rest of your life. Yeah, it might work, but maybe that's not a good example. But the point is, you tasted what is or what could be, but it's just held out like a carrot too far for you to reach it. But you seen it, you had it. Matter of fact, they might have given you a bite in the beginning, and then they held it out 2 meters in front of you. The mark remembers the early sample. That's the point. Remembers how it felt, remembers what seemed possible. Maybe you were waiting for that thing for so long, right? So instead of responding to the current pattern with clean judgment, they keep relating to the original version or the original situation or occurrence, whatever. They wait for it to come back now. They explain the change. They lower the standard. They keep a little hope alive because what they're hoping for did, in fact, appear once or a few times. And that's why the rationing stage is so effective. It doesn't need to satisfy you. It only needs to keep your hope from dying. And during this stage, another thing happens. The mark starts to feel easily replaceable. It's like, oh, well, you better wait because there's people lined up for your position. Like, you better stay online. It's funny, I go back to these Krispy Kreme donuts. I remember when it came to Toronto, when there was lines like down the block. I think it was during that time, COVID or whatever it was. There was lines literally at this one location in the area down the block. People standing in line for donuts that they know are bad for themselves, right? But they did it to people. They've done it all over the world, I believe. Anyway, this isn't this isn't like some attack at Krispy Kreme. I'm just remembering something that's delicious, something that's amazing that a lot of people like. And if you only got a little taste, you're gonna stand in line, right? You've had a donut, you got a Krispy Kreme donut once. You know what I mean. Anyway, so it's like you better stay online. You better hold. you better hold. They better hold their place in line. Better not ask too much. Better not step away. Better not press. Bug me too much. Better not miss your turn. Now, the whole thing becomes about suspended readiness, waiting, watching, staying available. And once a person has been reduced to that, they're not dealing with mutuality anymore. They're dealing with managed access. And that's the drip. It's managed, right? You get a little bit here and there, right? And a lot of people lose years right there. But they proposed 5 years ago. They said we don't need a paper. Yeah, okay. They said they're going to leave their wife, or they said they're going to leave their husband. Okay. They did. They swore. When their wife was away on vacation with their friends, we laid up in their bed and looked at the moonlight or watched a movie, and it was like I can envision what my marriage would be with this person. You understand? Like those types of things, right? Shouldn't be there in the first place, but you got caught up. And as I said, a lot of people lose right there. Not because they never saw anything wrong, because the ration kept hope alive just enough to outrun your judgment. And I'm sure many of you have kicked yourself because you've allowed yourself to get run up in that game. And I don't need you to feel bad about yourself. Just understand that there was a whole process to what happened. It wasn't just you're an idiot and you fell for it. You know what I mean? And that's why this episode is so important. And the cruelty isn't not only that they ration you, right? The cruelty is that they first educated your body on abundance and then switched you to scarcity. The weapon. At some point in this process, the mark usually hands over a weapon. That's right, the mark. You know, the used. They hand over a weapon. Maybe not all at once. Maybe not on purpose, but it happens. It might be their confession of how they really feel. It might be their body, their loneliness, their shame, their deep wish to be chosen, their fear of being left or being alone forever, their willingness to endure, their patience, their mercy, their tenderness to override what they know in order to keep what they want. Once the user learns which hunger runs deepest, they don't need anything else. That's the weapon. And they got you. And I don't want to go too much further without saying this to anybody. I I pray that you don't use this against anybody. Um, I realize that it can be used because I'm breaking this down so plainly. I believe that um, I think if somebody actually followed this, sadly, you could hurt a lot of people. So please, please, I'm begging you, please don't use this on anybody. It works. But at the same time, like this isn't that podcast. This isn't for that purpose at all. So Lord forbid you use this on someone else. Even if it happened to you, please don't use it on anybody else. You know what it feels like, right? Remember that. Because I think sometimes people who are users, it's happened to them. And for whatever reason, they learn the blueprint and then they do it to somebody else. And I'm like, if you know how you felt when it happened to you, why would you do it to somebody else? And this is where the story gets even sadder, because by this stage, the mark often sees more than people think. yeah, then you're not blind. You know what's happening to you. This is not always a story about total blindness. Love is blind. Ah, man, your eyes are wide open, but you're still looking at the hope. The what could be, the what you want. Right. This is not. Yeah, it's just not about not seeing. A lot of the time, it's a story about somebody going down with their eyes open, kind of like Buddy in Titanic. He's like, why couldn't she just move over on that wooden plank as he reaches up and sinks beneath the water? um, they they see enough to worry, enough to question, enough to feel this mismatch, enough to know they're not being treated in a stable or a healthy way. But they're already ensnared, already attached to the sample. Sample happened so long ago. Already attached to the sample, right? Already bent around the possibility of being chosen. Already emotionally organized around the hope that this specific person might still come through for them. So now the mark is in a terrible position. They're not fully ignorant. They're not fully free either. And what happens or what keeps them there is usually not stupidity. It's longing. It's deprivation. You know, before I go forward, why do you think like you hear about all these rich people and then all of a sudden they get juked for their money? I was reading that apparently what happened to Al Pacino was we knew like I think he had a child at like 80 or 82 or some nonsense like that with a 28-year-old. First of all, what's he doing with a 28-year-old? Second of all, what's a 28-year-old doing with an 82? Like, come on. Very beautiful woman, right? Any normal guy from 18 to 50 or 40 or whatever it is would love to be with this woman. Right? Guys who are virile, guys who are strong and moving with their life and stuff's happening and she picks an 82-year-old. Okay, so they had this kid. Then what happened? This is just what I've been told. I could be wrong. Things could have worked out differently and I could be, really wrong in this whole situation. But what I heard was the woman would like or would wanted $30,000 for child support a month. $30,000. And maybe his situation was he was deprived of young beauty, or maybe like, I mean, he's a star, so I'm sure he could have many women, even at his old crusty age. You know what I mean? But there's some lack there, and not just him. Like, I just think of all the different athletes that have ever been with someone that they probably couldn't have gotten if they weren't rich, famous athletes or rich, famous entertainers or musicians or whatever it is, or political figures or heads of companies, right? There's just, you look at the guy, you look at the woman, you say, you know, it must be the money, right? um, and of course, it keeps them usually wondering, man, how dumb was I, right? But the thing is, you're not fully ignorant. They're not fully free either, though. And what keeps them there is usually not just simple stupidity, it's longing. And, everybody knows what their thing is. Everybody knows why you're in it. You're in it to win it. We know the thing. There's a thing that you're trying to get while you're in there with your eyes wide open. You see what's happening to you. And most of the time, it's longing. It's a lust usually inside. You're drawn away. You're drawn off by your own lust. I know that people like to say the devil made me do it, but no, it's in you. It's something that's inside of you that you're trying to get. It's deprivation. It's lust for satisfaction. It's the argument in their own mind that says, yes, I know something is wrong. I know. Reminds me of that song that says, don't wake me I'm dreaming. You know that song? Look it up. um, or Won't Wake Me If I'm Dreaming. I can't remember how it goes. Anyway, but maybe not enough is wrong yet to let go. And that's why you can't help people by insulting them for staying. You can't go to your friend, what are you, dumb? Like you can try and it might work for some people, but it might work this week and then next week you find out that they're back with them. And then you don't talk that much anymore because you called them dumb. Or you tried to talk down to them about their whatever, their partner or their whatever it is, and they stop talking, and next you know, they slowly isolate. When a person starts isolating you from the people that would help you in these situations, that's part of the game, right? So be wary of anybody who doesn't want you talking to your mom or your best friend who hasn't done them anything, or when somebody starts pulling you out of your circle, remember that. You have to understand the mechanics of the whole situation. That's what you have to understand. The mark handed over the one thing that could be used to outrank their own judgment. Your judgment is usually the thing that will keep you safe, right? Maybe you don't have a protected circle, and now you know what you're seeing. You lost your judgment because you've handed it over. You've given them your deepest, darkest need, and they said, okay, good. I'll give you a little taste over here, and then we'll just give you a little drip, a little drippy drip, right? And once that happens, freedom becomes much, much harder. Not impossible, but much harder. Next, confusion, false clarity, and the line. When the mark finally starts asking for more clarity, here we go. Yep, more consistency, more respect, more accountability. What do they usually get? Not much. Or worse, they get imitations. A little bit of respect that doesn't change the structure of anything. A little bit of emotional language that sounds thoughtful. Oh, you're sorry? But doesn't actually name anything that they're sorry about. A little bit of explanation that only works from the user's standpoint. I don't know if you missed that, and I don't know if you've experienced this when you might say, I feel this and I feel this, and you did that. And I can't believe you did this, and I'm hurt about that, and why did this happen? You've come to the point where you're trying to catch yourself. It's like you're sliding down a slippery slope. And you're like, I have no traction, and like, why did you do this? And why did you do that? I felt this. And then you'll get an answer like this. Check it out. I understand. I'm sorry. Okay, so what do they understand? And what are they sorry about? Are they sorry that they fooled you? Or are they sorry that you feel this way? Are they sorry that they hurt you and they're going to do better? No, they keep it very, very short. That's not real clarity. There is no clarity. You're sitting there looking at the text message or trying to like, what did that mean? I heard the word sorry. Great. Like, but what is that sorry attached to? And what do you understand? Because you haven't told me. And if you try to press them for the what they're sorry about and what you understand, you're probably too scared to do that. Because you still got hope. It's not real clarity. Real clarity would reduce confusion. Real clarity would make room for both people's reality. Real clarity would not require one person to ignore what their nervous system has been screaming. What the mark often gets instead is false clarity, something shaped in enough to slow them down, but not truthful enough to set them free. And all the while, confusion stays in the background. Every time. Confusion, disorientation, mixed signals, crossed wires, warmth followed by distance, promise followed by vagueness, moments of nearness that keep the mark from leaving, followed by enough coldness to keep them unstable. And one of the ugliest pieces of this is the way replaceability gets activated. And maybe it already happens by the time you say something, you've already been replaced. The mark starts feeling like they can be swapped out easily. Like they better hold their place and shut up. Better stay available or else. Better not risk losing whatever this is. Better not look away at something else, because if I catch you looking over there, I'm done. That's how some users keep control without ever saying don't leave. They make the mark feel that stepping away will cost them something they can't bear to lose, even though they don't even have what they want. It's kind of like at a slot machine, right? You step away now, you put those 400 coins in the machine and the next pull could be it. But if you step away now, somebody else is going to take your place. So the mark stays in line. And once you're standing in the line for your own dignity, something has gone badly wrong. Because love doesn't require that. Respect doesn't require that. Real interest does not require that at all. Managed scarcity does. That's the line. Confusion keeps the mark unstable, scarcity keeps them obedient, and a lot of users never need more than that, really. Honestly. Not always by chains, sometimes by just being in a quay. just standing online. Yep, they got you. And you'll wait 2 blocks for that thing. You'll stand behind 15 other people or 400 people for that thing that they let you taste. If it's good enough, right? If it's what you needed, which they already figured out, right? The reveal. What finally breaks the spell? It'll be on our next episode. I'm just joking. All right. What finally breaks the spell? Often it isn't insight, it's revelation. At some point, the user gets careless, arrogant, bored, frustrated, or overconfident enough that the mark, or the mask, I should say, the mask slips. You hear that? At some point, the user gets careless, arrogant, bored, frustrated, or overconfident enough that the mask slips. Have you ever seen that movie? I don't mean to creep anybody out. You ever seen that movie called Devil's Advocate? Where is it Charlize Theron, I think, is Keanu Reeves' wife, I think, in that movie. And they're at this party and she doesn't feel well. I don't even know if it's Charlize Theron. I can't remember who it is, but I think it is. But anyway, there's this one woman, a black woman, who she looks at and she sees her normal face. And then all of a sudden you can tell she, like the woman, the beautiful woman, beautiful black woman, she's a demon because she looks at her and then she like shift changes into this weird looking vampirish, blood sucking kind of a thing looking. And then she switches back. It's like, are you okay? Right? Sometimes, you know, you'll get it. You'll see the reveal just slightly, just quick enough. It doesn't have to be that long. You just really need to see a real picture of what really is happening, not insight into what's happening, but a revelation. And the person reveals themselves for who they really are. So maybe you'll see them all of a sudden in anger and you'll realize they never liked you all along. They never liked you. Forget about love. Forget about respect. We know that they didn't respect you. Maybe not in a dramatic moment, right? But maybe in a series of moments, you're putting them together because you're cerebral like that, right? But eventually, there's enough truth on the table that the mark can't honestly keep explaining it away. And you'd think that would be the end, right? You'd think once the truth is visible, everything gets simple. A lot of the time, it doesn't because social currency is often still on the user's side. They may still be more believable, more polished, in a better position, more protected by image. So even when the mark finally sees it and can even articulate it, that doesn't always mean other people will understand it. Not that you really need other people, but most people need other people to understand what's happened. Maybe other people are involved. Maybe families involved, kids are involved. Maybe parents have been met and had dinner with. Who knows? I don't know, right? Told many different situations. And some people won't, and some people will understand perfectly well and still think they can handle the user better than the mark did. Yeah, some people will see what happened and they'll slide into your place, maybe. Yeah, we see what happened. Your problem. Let me get in this line here for a second and see what's really good. That's a dark thing to realize, though. I don't even know if some of you understood what I just said there. Sometimes you go bend an ear. Hey, man, yeah, she did this and that. Or, hey, he did this or that. Oh, he did? He did. Oh, and then they slide in your spot. Sometimes corruption doesn't repel people. Sometimes it attracts another kind of corruption. So now the mark has two shocks to deal with. The first is that the user was not what they hoped. The second is that the world around the user may not be morally shocked by by that in a way that the mark still is. And that's hard to swallow, if you understand, because now it's not just a personal loss. Now it's an education in how appetite travels socially. And that education can either sharpen you or poison you. The damage to the mark. The deepest damage usually isn't just rage. Sometimes it's grief. Sometimes it's disappointment. Sometimes it's disbelief. Sometimes it's little pieces of rage that never fully organize into clean fire. Sometimes it's self-disgust, shame, brokenness. And one of the strangest parts is that the mark may still feel sorry for the user even after understanding what happened. Sometimes the mark will, tell this whole long story to someone. And then the person, what? I can't believe they did it. They're a dirty, rotten scoundrel. And then the mark will be like, no, 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 they're not that bad. No, 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 come on, give me a break. Like they've gone through their, you understand? They start making excuses for them even after all this has happened to them. That's the twisted part of this. They still shoot them bail in their own mind. And they may have to verbalize it if somebody talks and says too much. They still think about what the user must have gone through. They still make space for the user's pain. They still lower the sentence on them. They still soften the judgment. They might even still say, if you ever need anything or any help, I'm here for you. It's not always foolishness, although it sounds crazy, right? Sometimes that's just softness, or that's just, softness surviving. Like that's just, just a way of making sense of it all. But it's dangerous softness if it goes unchecked. You find yourself right back there, right? Because then the hurt starts spreading outwards. The mark starts just distrusting people who didn't do anything to them. They start becoming bitter, start becoming or getting cold in the wrong places to the wrong people. Start assuming bad faith where bad faith hasn't yet shown up. Not because they admire what happened, because pain left unexamined starts teaching bad lessons. That's why this kind of experience is not just a breakup issue or trust issues, it's a moral issue because it doesn't just take from the mark, it tries to rewrite them. And if the mark doesn't understand that they may spend years thinking the goal is just to get over the person, sometimes the real goal is to keep the damage from becoming your new character. That's the work. And those of you who've already listened to that whole series I did on pain and, after breakups and all that stuff, you probably kind of understand where I'm at with this. Not pretending it didn't happen, right? Not living in it forever either. Understanding it is enough. Well, understanding it enough, sorry, that it stops having the power to redesign you from the inside. So you understand the thing so much that it's not going to turn you into something else. You're still going to be able to stay your wonderful self, even though this person did this to you. You know what I mean? The greased rung. So what's the lesson? Not be careful. That's too vague. The lesson is this: the close rung, and hopefully you know what a rung is. So think about being a kid, okay? And think about you swinging from one bar to the next, maybe the monkey bars, right? Where you have the one, you stretch out, you swing your body, then you come forward and you grab the next one. Just realize that the close rung in these situations is usually greased. Leave you on, have you ending up on your back. What's nearest to your hunger is often least able to hold your weight, and that's the problem. The thing that feels closest to relief, closest to validation, closest to satisfaction, closest to being chosen is often exactly the thing that should not be trusted with your full weight, your full heart, your full finance, your full everything. Not because closeness is bad, right? Because nearness is not proof of strength. The ungreased rung, the one that could actually carry you, is usually just outside of a comfortable distance. It's just too far for you to jump, leap. That'll have you down worse than the, the close one a lot of the time. It requires time, distance, testing, patience, discernment. It doesn't flatter your hungry, that far off one. It asks more from your judgment. And a healthy person does not throw their full weight into a greased rung. It just doesn't make any sense. They wipe it first. Yeah, to see what it really is. That means they test. They pay attention to consistency. Is it there? No? Move on. Reciprocity. Is it there? No? Move on. Confession. How the person behaves under frustration. How do they behave when they're frustrated? You don't even know. How do they behave around boundaries that you set up for yourself? Do they have boundaries? How they speak about their own guilt, the stuff that they've done, whether they can survive not getting instant access, whether they know how to hold truth when it costs them something. That's what wisdom does. Wisdom creates friction before commitment. There should be some friction. And one of the cleanest laws in all of this is if someone is truly interested in you, you won't have to chase them. I don't mean there's no mutual effort. That's not what I'm saying. I mean, you won't have to chase basic evidence. You won't have to chase replies, chase clarity, chase consistency, chase respect, chase definition. What is this? Chase the feeling that you matter. Somebody who genuinely is interested may move slowly, right? May be imperfect, may have limits, but they won't make you hunt for proof that their interest is actually real. They'll make themselves findable. That's the difference. A user makes you chase your place in their life. A real person meets you enough that you don't have to abandon your dignity to locate them. That's the greased rung. And once you learn it, you stop grabbing what's close just because your hunger can reach it. The greased rung is close, but the real rung holds and will hold you and will allow you to grip the return. There's one more thing you have to understand because this catches a lot of people after they think they're free. Sometimes the user comes back, especially if the mark doesn't come back groveling, right? If the old access mattered, there's a real chance the user circles back for you. Not always. And don't get excited. Ooh, they'll be back. No, you know what you just went through. Come on. Not always, though, but often enough that you need a rule for it. Listen, and the first rule is this: a return is not proof of love. Some work had to be done in them. They should be able to explain what they did. They should explain what they did to you, even. It may be proof of appetite, proof of memory, proof that another source ran dry. So maybe there was a breakup somewhere else. And they're like, oh, but I remember this person was so good. So they come back to you, right? Proof of wounded ego, proof that they missed the access, proof that they want to see whether the old door is still in working order. So if somebody comes back, don't answer that return with longing. Don't. Please don't. Answer it with structure. That's the rule. A changed person can survive boundaries that you put up. They can survive delay, gratification, or whatever that is. They can survive direct questions that you have that they wouldn't answer before properly. They can survive not being trusted quickly or right away. They can survive your caution. They can survive memory. They can survive equal terms. And this is for you. Maybe you've been cheated on. The cheater can go through all of that if they come back and they're for real. An unchanged user usually can't deal with all of those things. They can't survive your boundaries. They can't have delay on access to whatever it is they need access to. They need it right now. They can't survive direct questions on what they did and why they did it and why things are going to be different. They can't survive not being trusted quickly. They can't survive your caution. They can't survive your memory of what happened. They can't survive equal terms. They want reentry, not repair. So if they return, The questions are practical. Can they name what they did clearly? Can they tolerate not being let back in so fast? Can they respect the fact that trust doesn't come back because emotion showed up? Can they bear structure? Are they offering repair? Or are they trying to reopen access? Just access. I need your energy. That's where a lot of people get pulled back in because they romanticize the return of the king, right? They think, see, they came back. Ha, yes. Appetite has memory too. So, what do you do if they return? You test. You don't give raw access just on a whim. You don't hand them immediate emotional credit and cry in their arms. You don't melt because the old signal appeared again. You apply some friction to it. And if they change, the truth will survive that. Well, I can't go this Wednesday, but how about Wednesday after? Or how about Saturday instead? Put them off a little bit. See what's up for real. If they haven't, like if they've changed, the truth will survive those little things, right? And I'm not saying just put them through a whole bag of tests, but you need to have some boundaries. You need to do some testing. They need to feel a little friction, a little pushback, a little not so easy this time. Not so fast, buddy. If they haven't done the work and if they haven't changed, then their performance that they're back for you won't last. And that's the return, the return protocol. Not bitterness, not games, structure. Do not confuse recurrence with repentance. Do not confuse reappearance with transformation. Do not confuse being remembered with being loved. And do not reopen what only knows how to feed on you. Because some people return not to rebuild. Some people return to check whether the old extraction point is still available. The second time is not for hope. The second time is for discernment. So check it out. Closing. Check it out. So what do you do with all of this? You stop using soft language for hard patterns. You stop calling confusion depth. It's deep. You stop calling scarcity value. He is value, and that's why I can't seem to connect with him. Come on. You stop calling your own chase devotion. I'm devoted to this. You stop calling selective attention love. You stop mistaking being remembered for being cherished. You stop confusing being chosen by a confused person with being valued. Sorry. You stop confusing being chosen by a confused person with being valued. And you get more honest about what you want, more honest about what you've been deprived of, more honest about what in you is still easy to bait, more honest about the places where your own hunger has outranked your judgment before, your lust. That honesty is not weakness. Is not weakness. That's how you stop getting handled. You also stop assuming that because somebody is wounded, they're safe. I mean, don't they always say that a wounded lion is always, or a wounded animal is always more dangerous in many cases because they're fighting for survival, and it's going to be you or them, and it's not going to be them. Right? They're hurt. They're broken. They don't want to be broken anymore. So somebody's going to break. It ain't going to be them. They're broken enough. You also stop assuming that people care about you for sure, without any proof. Just because they're wounded doesn't mean they're safe, man. Plenty of wounded people are dangerous. Plenty of hurting people still know how to extract. Plenty of damaged people still know how to build comfort out of someone else's sacrifice. And you stop giving moral cover to people who keep showing you the same pattern. You stop reopening what only knows how to feed on you. You stop standing in line for your own dignity, and you start asking better questions. Not, do they want me? That's too vague. The better question is, can what they're offering actually hold weight? Can it hold truth? Can it hold reciprocity? Can it hold time? Can it hold boundaries? Can it hold your full humanity, not just your useful parts? Some. That's the real difference. Because not everything close is safe, and not everything intense is deep, and not everything that knows how to reach your wound knows how to love you. That's the lesson. And once you really, really, really learn it, people don't get the old version of you anymore. They don't get the person who mistakes the sample for substance. They don't get the person who lives on drips and calls it devotion. They don't get the person who keeps waiting in line for what should have come forward in the first place on its own. They meet structure. They meet memory. They meet discernment. They meet somebody who knows the close rung is usually greased. It's just right there, right? Yeah. Why is it just right there? Somebody else would have, right? It's usually greased. And it doesn't throw their full weight. You don't throw your full weight on it anymore. You test it. You wipe it off and see what's really there. Clean the glass and really look what you're looking at here. What is this? You need a little revelation. And that's what freedom looks like here. Not pretending none of it happened, not hating everyone forever, right? Just finally knowing the difference between what pulls on your hunger and what can actually carry your life. Okay, guys, that's about it for today. Hopefully you fully understand this. Like I feel for people who have gone through this situation, blindly open their eyes or with open eyes or whatever it is. But I hope I laid this down. Now that I think of it, I think I've heard somebody else talk about this, but I don't think they went in depth like how I did. Not comparing myself to anybody else. Obviously, I haven't named anybody else. But if you don't fully get this, I would really suggest, if you're struggling with being used by someone, I suggest maybe leave this alone and maybe come back to it and listen to it again and listen to the parts that shape your whole experience and give your head a shake and wake up. Anyhow, till next time, this is MCM signing off. Take care of yourself. Hey, come check out You Probably Right podcast. Society is getting more unpredictable every day, but at the same time, predictable in its unpredictability. Say that 4 times real fast. Come with me as I attempt to find clarity in all the fog while staying way outside the box and kicking the box way down the road with my size 12 ducks. I use the Bible, experience, education, fortune, misfortune, life's lessons, life's mistakes to sort through all the mess. I talk about news, God, God, self-help, sports, sickness, health, music, parenting, love, humbleness, hurt, pain, joy, and all the things that might make you say, I never thought of it that way. Hopefully, anyway. Also, I take a stab at answering tough and not so tough questions, and all the while understand that, listen,
Sometimes you end up in the hot seat and there's no thermostat. Well, that's how it is here. And because there's no topic, well, very few topics off the table, Torontonians will understand that Doug Ford reference there. Hopefully the podcast will be helpful and uplifting. And hey, maybe you'll find your own private Idaho here somewhere. Hope to see you soon.